Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about Leftist Intolerance update. Lloyd Marcus joins me to talk about a lot of things. And the Senate GOP is feuding over the next bailout. And, of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And hello again and welcome to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I wanted to give a tiny update to yesterday. You may recall on the show I was giving you examples of how the left in this country has become increasingly intolerant, not really letting any other opinions be expressed that are inconsistent in any way with the left-wing agenda in this country. Not simply that they criticize people who disagree with them, but they truly try to shut them down in a variety of ways. It is shutting down one of the most important, robust promises of America, which is freedom of speech. First quick story, you may have heard about this, but Michelle Malkin, a very prominent conservative commentator, author, she's joined us in the show sometime recently, the last few months, about her new book related to immigration. But she spoke at a rally, I believe she's part of organizing it, it was in Denver. It was called Back the Blue Rally, basically standing up for police in the face of the effort of the left to say that we should defund the police. So they had a rally, she was part of it, she was speaking, she was actually physically attacked by Antifa and Black Lives Matter protesters. I didn't even like that word. Protest can mean you behave well and you hold a sign and walk down a street and chant whatever you want to chant. These are violent people, basically trying to shut down Michelle Malkin and anyone else who wants to stand up for the police. So the rally, again, she was actually attacked. And the thing gotta love about Michelle Malkin, because she is she's very clever with her words. She really doesn't take being silenced well. So she ended up tweeting afterwards. It was videos so people can see how she was actually attacked by these people. But then she tweeted out an SOS to President Trump. So she's talking about the police official in Colorado who is apparently supportive of Black Lives Matter, had marched with Black Lives Matter the previous week. So she tweeted to President Trump, so at Jared Polis, at Denver Police Chief Pausen, are you okay with pro-police patriots being swarmed, targeted, and assaulted in a clearly orchestrated attack? I caught it all on video and recorded the faces of the brutal animals. Please, at Real Donald Trump, we need law and order. And then she put SOS. Gotta love Michelle Malkin, but understand this is not a unique, one-of-a-kind incident. This is an ongoing methodology, the standard operating procedure for Antifa and Black Lives Matter, simply shutting down anyone who dares to disagree with them. Another one in the academic realm involves a teacher, a public school teacher in the state of Michigan. His name is Justin Kucera, who was a coach and a teacher, well-loved according to current students, other teachers, past students, but who was fired by the school district in Michigan because he put out in a tweet, and this is the exact words of his tweet, "I'm done being silent. At Real Donald Trump is our president." Okay, he didn't say anything more, just he is our president, which is a factual statement. He is actually our president. But he was called into by the administration, who could not stand that he wrote that. He talked about the meeting, called in by the superintendent and the principal, told at the beginning they were going to talk with him about his tweet, and then they would make a decision about his future employment in the upcoming days. And then he said by the end of the meeting, where he said, yes, I did put that tweet out, they told him that he either had the option to quit or be fired. And it's really interesting because was a coach and a teacher, and he had students and fellow teachers and past students coming out to say, the guy is not political at school. He never, during coaching and during teaching classes, was political. This is a one-time thing. He put a tweet out with a factual statement, Trump is our president, fired, I hope he's got a good lawyer, I hope he sues. And I'm not a litigious person, but you have to start challenging these left-wing bullies. Final story, very interesting, in the city in California, Redwood City, California, the city council had permitted the Black Lives Matter organization to paint a giant Black Lives Matter message on a public street. on Broadway Street. And so a lawyer in Redwood City said, well, then she wanted to be able to paint on a street or on the street MAGA 2020, MAGA 2020. Now, bear in mind, the Redwood City Council was fine with the Black Lives Matter thing, could not think of a reason to justify saying no to this lawyer who wanted to paint MAGA 2020. And so their answer was to spray paint off and remove the Black Lives Matter message. They would rather surrender the message they obviously preferred than to allow someone to express support for the President of the United States of America. And again, people, these stories are just, I could spend the entire show sharing stories like this, where the left has become not just belligerent, but emboldened. They actually feel they can stop other people from speaking, and they assume most people will back down, and sadly, that seems in many cases to be true. It's easier to be silent than to speak up and say what you want to say in the face of the growing belligerence of the anti-American left. And that, my very fine friends, is today's First Five. Well, as I mentioned at the start, I have a guest joining us. I was just telling him off air before we started. I think he joined me in this show like 5 years ago. I didn't find it, but quite a while ago. But his name is Lloyd Marcus, and he is he's an author, he's a columnist, a frequent columnist. He is a musician, he's a performer. He's just a very active conservative guy, and we have him on phone. But before I bring him on, I'm going to tell you, play for you, ask Matt the Wonderful to play for you a clip that is from what he has created, Trump Train 2020 video supporting Trump's re-election. This is a short clip, but Matt, can we play that first?
And we will make America great again. God bless you. I love you.
I say praise the Lord. He's draining the swamp in Washington, D.C., restoring freedom to you and me. Trump train.
Okay, that is just the beginning of his video. I think it's 3 or 4 minutes long. The link is available on our website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop down, list of links, and let us bring in and say hello to Lloyd Marcus. Hello, sir.
Debbie, I am a black man who has finally seen the light. I fully embrace the Black Lives Matter agenda, and therefore, as a white person, you must kneel to me and refer to me as your royal blackness.
Okay, you know what? You don't remember talking to me if you think that's going to go over with me. No, but on a serious note, yeah. Yeah.
Can you believe this nonsense? Why is everybody bending a knee to this obviously Marxist, racist hate group? They hate white people. They want to destroy the nuclear family. They want to take down America. And we have all these major corporations funding them to high heaven. The last I heard is up to $400 million. And the Bank of America just pledged $1 billion to Black Lives Matter. That's insane. I saw this old Navy commercial, and they have dumped everything into this Black Lives Matter commercial. It's LGBTQ, it's everything. And all of this is supposed to be about Black Lives Matter. It has nothing to do with Black lives. It's a scam.
Wow, well, that's it. I love starting out with this. It's a great way. We have so many things to talk about today, and I'm so glad you're available to join me today. So, first of all, many Americans who are not tuned in politically assume that the Black Lives Matter movement just means protest over police brutality, reaction to what they saw happen in Minneapolis with George Floyd. So they think Black Lives Matter simply means that people want to stand up and declare that we're all equal, and of course everyone's life matters. And I'm so glad you are correcting that. And I want to talk about that a little bit, what the Black Lives Matter movement really is, because what you made reference to, go ahead, you go right ahead.
Well, I was going to say this whole thing is nonsense. Even the peaceful protesters, like everybody says, well, like I have no problem with the peaceful protesters. I do, because there's nothing to protest about. The whole world saw what happened with George Floyd. The whole world condemned it. The policeman was charged with murder. End of subject. There should have been not a need for one day of protesting. And this whole thing of systemic racism, that's another huge, absurd lie. Blacks are only 13% of the population. So what that means is white America elected the first black president for 2 terms. Oprah Winfrey is worth $2.6 billion, Debbie. Give me some of that systemic racism. you know?
Yep, absolutely.
It's totally insane. And let me say something else too. Like, everyone is talking about we must have police reform. That's another lie, because research shows by Heather McDonald that the greatest defender of black lives for years has been the police. Policemen killed 10 blacks last year. Guess how many blacks are murdering one another in Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Baltimore? It's black on black murder, and 30 to 40 blacks are murdering one another every single weekend. How come those black lives don't matter? And you can't talk about those black lives, or they're going to call you a racist. So this whole thing is just totally backwards. It's a huge lie for the Democrats to further their agenda. I feel like that when this George Floyd thing first happened, we have allowed leftists to control our schools for decades, and they have made our kids sleeper cells against their parents and against this country. When this George Floyd thing happened, I feel like the leftists told our kids, go, 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 swarm, 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 tear down everything American. And that's what this whole thing is all about.
Oh, it absolutely is. I'm glad you made reference to the Black Lives Matter movement, the actual organization, because they are Marxists in their founding. And there was a great clip we played a few weeks ago. I think it was Marcellus Wiley, who is on a sports program. He's not a political commentator, but he brought out some of the things that Black Lives Matter say on their website about destroying the nuclear family unit, destroying the patriarchal society, and just advocacy of things that many black Americans do not agree with. And I actually think he did a great service, and you're doing great service too, pointing out to Americans you can believe in equality and you can oppose police brutality in the rare circumstances when it occurs, but this movement is not about standing up for black lives. It's a very dangerous leftist movement.
Right. And this whole, I see all these young people walking around with these shirts that say equality. And I just feel like, gag me. Look, I have all of these millennials in my family who totally support Black Lives Matter, and they post stuff on Facebook like, we are no longer running, we're not going to stand for it. They haven't experienced an ounce of racism in their entire lives. I mean, it's just totally. Back in 1952, my father was one of the first blacks to break the color barrier to become a Baltimore City firefighter. The white firefighters, they hated my dad and they humiliated him at every turn, and he could not drink a cup of coffee from the same coffee pot as the white firefighters. He could not use the same eating utensils as the white firefighters. Despite those horrific working conditions, my father won Firefighter of the Year 2 times.
Wow.
So, thank you. But
wow.
Yet the Democrat Party, they always tell black Americans that we're inferior and standards have to be lowered to accommodate us. And I don't know why so many black folks are still stuck on voting for Democrats. I started to say stuck on stupid, but that would be rude.
Well, you wouldn't be the first one, but I do want to, you were on to this, though, about how the American left uses the black community, the black voter, long before Black Lives Matter came along. Your book from 2000,
yeah.
Your book, 2010, Confessions of a Black Conservative, How the Left Has Shattered the Dreams of Martin Luther King, Jr. and Black America. Can you just quickly summarize, what was your message of that book?
Basically, the bottom line of that book, I show blacks how the Democrat Party has been scamming them for decades, and they need to move away from the Democrat Party, because what they do, the Democrat Party, it crushes the human spirit. It crushes human potential. Ask yourself, now look, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas is one of the most famous black men and powerful black men in the entire world. So is Dr. Ben Carson. How come the Congressional Black Caucus, the NAACP, and the Democrat Party, why do they hate these extraordinarily successful black men? Because they are not saying we are victims in America, and they achieve success the old-fashioned way, just like white people achieve success. They went to school, they got a decent education, and they earned it. Debbie, if I say nothing else today, America is the greatest land of opportunity on this planet for all who choose to pursue their dreams. Anything else is an evil, bald-faced lie.
Amen to that. And I think that's one of the main points of my show over and over. We're blessed to live in the most extraordinary country in human history, the place of the experiment of human liberty that survived. I do want to ask you, though, you wrote about in your columns, you write maybe other places, but I find you're writing on American Thinker, and you wrote about the idea that you and your wife, I think, have been involved in a bus tour. It is the Conservative Campaign Committee's mini bus tour of battleground states to help elect GOP candidates. And you were in Colorado recently. Just what are you encountering when you're doing this? What do you do to sell the message, and what are you encountering in the people you talk to?
Okay. Well, we have several different initiatives. We run television ads, radio ads. We do a lot of social media. But the most effective thing that we do, or I can't say the most effective, but we rally the locals in various states to stand on street corners and wave signs for Donald Trump. And with everybody being afraid around the country to wear a MAGA cap or to even put American flag on their home, when these people see us, see a bunch of us standing on the street corner waving American flags and waving Donald Trump flags and signs, they go crazy. This one guy drove by and stuck $100 in my face and said, get your people some water because it is hot out here. We were in we were in Nevada and we were in Arizona. And it was great. And people, they needed to see that because every single night they are seeing a bunch of thugs tearing down and destroying our country. And they needed to see somebody standing up boldly saying, hey, we love America and we love Donald Trump. Get over it.
Wow. Well, I just can't tell you how refreshing it is to hear you and to hear your passion about it all and to be out there. You're right. I think so many Americans, even people who are normally politically active, the political environment has become so toxic, it seems better and safer just to kind of be quiet, don't put a sign in your yard, stay home, and maybe on election day you'll go in and vote for Trump, but you're certainly not going to tell people. And I think there's a groundswell of people who love what you're doing and love the idea that they can go in November and vote for what Donald Trump is doing because they really are alarmed by this destruction of America and by the utter silence of the American left allowing this destruction in the inner cities. The cities where this violence is happening are almost all of them. They're Democrat mayors, Democrat-run cities, and they are refusing to stand down this violence. I think Americans can't wait. I mean, a lot of Americans can't wait to get out and vote for Donald Trump.
And we know why all these Democrat governors and mayors are doing this, right, Debbie? Because they think all this is going to fall back negatively on Donald Trump, and that's all they care about. That has been so heinous about this whole COVID hysteria and the George Floyd hysteria. They will do anything to the American people to get Donald Trump. They don't care that the suicide rates are skyrocketing. They don't care that family businesses are lost forever. They don't care. They do not care that babies and kids are being murdered every weekend in these riots. They don't care. And I know you're not supposed to use this word about politics, but I do. They are evil. They're just plain evil.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And on a more serious note, then, about what the agenda of the left and of Antifa and of Black Lives Matter, the very Marxist agenda, there is a lot of talk about the idea that in 2020, our election this coming November, seems like it's around the corner, that we have, as you wrote in a column, you titled a column recently, Last Stand to Save America as Founded. And I would love to have you tell me, and because I agree, and I've been making similar comments on related various topics about this is kind of a last stand. But why do you say that? What do you say? Why do you say this election is the last stand for America?
Well, the one thing that has been exposed, how the Democrats, how all these Democrat states have handled the COVID lockdown. This will show what they will do when they have power. They have totally ignored the United States Constitution, and we know that if Joe Biden is elected, he won't be the president. All these far-left radicals will be pulling his strings. All of our constitutional liberties will be totally ignored. The Democrats have wanted to kill babies after they have been born, kill healthy babies after they have been born. They will do that. They will take our guns. Donald Trump has been tremendous for religious liberty, and Joe Biden has already said that he will reverse all of Donald Trump's decisions regarding religious liberty, including suing the Little Sisters of the Poor. Again, I don't know if you remember, but Barack Obama, he wanted to sue them to force them to do abortions. Donald Trump dropped that lawsuit. Joe Biden says that if he's elected, he's going to pick that up again. And he has a list of 42 things that are anti-constitutional, anti-jobs, anti-American that he's going to do. So thank God that Donald J. Trump is there, and we got to keep him there. America, we have to vote for Donald Trump in November and keep him there, because if we do not, America as founded is gone.
I couldn't agree more, and I say very similar things on this show all the time. I think that the need for people to actually dive in and read even what Joe Biden admits, what he puts on his website, what his agenda is. I think Americans get duped by his kind of milquetoast appearance. They think he is kind of one of the more moderate, old school Democrats who really just is a little bit more concerned about the little guy, and they do not recognize that Biden has embraced the Bernie Sanders agenda. He has, in fact, announced, Bernie Sanders agenda, announced he is going very far left on so many issues, and in ways it's very hard to turn America back if he were to win. So if people, your Trump train video is as fun as anything. We'll play a little clip of it again in just a moment. But can people purchase or get a hold of that Trump train video?
Yes, they can go to LloydMarcus.com, and the other website is TrumpTrain2020USA.com. But they can always find everything about me at LloydMarcus.com.
So I said, okay, LloydMarcus.com. I'm mentioning, because I often go to American Thinker, your columns are there. The Trump Train 2020, I'm sorry, I lost it. Trump Train 2020 video.com. Say it again.
Trump Train 2020USA.com.
USA.com. Okay. Lloyd Marcus, you are just full of energy and passion for America and musical talent beside. Thank you so much for being available today. Thanks for joining me.
And thank you for having me. Thanks for having me, my sister. And we're going to get this done, right?
We are going to get this done. We're going to get it done. We are. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Okay, take care. Thank you. Okay, folks, I got to tell you, he's just obviously a character and a very talented musician, and he made that video in part, that music video in part, to counter, I guess, Neil Young or somebody made a, Neil Young made an anti-Trump video, so he said, we're not having that, so he made this pro-Trump one. This is a guy who he actually writes very well, an American thinker, and often his columns are a little bit personal stories. He'll weave in where he and his wife went to a family thing, or other times where he's engaging kind of more person to person, talking about America and politics. As I mentioned, he wrote a book 10 years ago now, recognizing how the Democrat Party has destroyed Black America, destroyed Black families, and duped many people, the majority of Black Americans, who vote for the Democrat Party, even though, as he points out, they're actually harming the Black family and the Black American. So he's a musical talent, and he actually does a lot of public speaking too, and public performing his music. So Lloyd Marcus, and again, you can find him. He said LloydMarcus.com, and also on our website, you can find a link to his Trump train video. Our website, AmericaCanWeTalk.org. And one more story for today, and this is actually really interesting. It kind of ties in. I've been talking a lot recently about the COVID crisis and coronavirus, and how we are not really adjusting our policy to fit the facts of where we are today. But the topic is, there's apparently a brewing dispute behind the scenes within the GOP caucus in the Senate, meaning the Senate, U.S. Senate, which has a majority Republican, so if they were together, they could get a lot of things done. The U.S. Senate has a majority Republican. They had a caucus meeting, meaning just the Republicans, at a lunch meeting, and apparently they had quite a feud. The basic argument is whether or not the Senate, the Republican-controlled Senate, should get behind the next bailout related to coronavirus. Is above, would end up being in total above $1 trillion, trillion dollars in new spending as the next COVID-19 aid package. And so this has been sent over by the White House. This is part of something the White House is trying to get behind, saying we've got to get more of an aid package out because of the ongoing trauma related to COVID-19. And fortunately, in my view, you're finding some Republicans pushing back. Rand Paul, being the most outspoken, just is reported to have made, I'm going to show you in a moment a couple of tweets he put out, I guess, or 4 tweets he put out after this caucus meeting was over. But he's pointing out, this is absurd. We are acting like we are socialists. We're acting like the government is, job is to take care of everybody and provide them income. There's also a squabble about the public schools. You have many public schools saying they don't want to reopen, but they do want the money sent. They want money from Washington while they're refusing to reopen. We talked in the show, I think last Monday, a week ago Monday, about the attitude of the Los Angeles Unified School District teachers, overwhelmingly left-wingers, who basically said to Washington, if you want us to reopen, we insist on Medicare for all, massively expanded spending for illegal aliens and their families, a tax on the millionaires with an M, a tax on the billionaires with a B, a whole list of flat-out Marxist communist demands. So the teachers are barely cooperating about school opening, and yet they want money from Washington. And so there was quite a scuffle. I don't mean a physical scuffle, but a very loud disagreement within the GOP caucus. And some of the things I want to share about that. One is that Rand Paul is just saying pure money. Are we crazy? You're talking about $1 trillion more dollars. You had the Treasury Secretary Mnuchin over there trying to move this along because he's supporting and doing what his boss, the president, wants. Acting Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, also working on Capitol Hill. Mitch McConnell, who is the majority leader, is apparently behind this. But in this lunch meeting, you had Rand Paul getting really just saying this is crazy. Where are we? It was just the Democrat caucus. And you even had Senator Ted Cruz, our senator from the great state of Texas, saying this is too much. It's just too much. Now, in one way, I have to tell you folks, I kind of hate to hear squabbling behind the scenes between the Republican majority in the Senate and the White House, because obviously the Democrats control the House. The Democrats are happy to spend money at all times on anything except the military. They never spend money in the military. But if there's domestic spending to be had, if there's dollars to be handed out for free, the Democrats in the House are going to be all over it, jumping up and down and clapping. Of course, I'm sure they'll probably even say this isn't enough money. Whatever it was that Trump asked for, you'll have the Democrats saying is not enough. But all of this battle, it is about money, and the money matters. And actually, despite the ridiculous profligate spending by the U.S. government on this COVID thing, and it has been ridiculous, and we don't have the money, and we are in debt, and it's like monopoly money. It's just producing money, sending off money to people, and so that by itself is a huge issue and worthy of opposition. I was very glad to hear Rand Paul spoke up about it and said we just can't be doing this. But there's a second issue that is underlying this, and that is what are we doing in our country related to our policy going forward on COVID-19. Before I get to that, I'm going to ask Matt the Wonderful to quick show you. These are 4 tweets that Rand Paul put out, which I really found kind of funny, all related to this thing. Just came from the Progressive Democrat, the Republican caucus. They're going to spend $105 billion, B as in boy, billion, more on education, more than we spend every year on the Department of Education. Anyone remember when Reagan conservatives were for eliminating the federal Department of Education? He also put out the majority of Republicans are now no different than socialist Democrats when it comes to debt. They simply don't care about debt, and they're preparing to add to pass another $1 trillion in debt this month, combined with the trillions from earlier this summer. And another genius idea heard from both caucuses today: too many schools closed this fall, so we have to send more federal aid for daycare. And finally, I really need to double check which caucus meeting I went to today. And I got to tell you folks, I am thrilled that Rand Paul is speaking out about this, because there really is a growing concern among conservatives around this country that all we hear out of Washington in response to COVID-19 is spend, and more fear. And that leads me to the kind of bigger point I want to make about this story. I'm glad Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and maybe others are going to speak up about we cannot keep just throwing money at this. But the larger problem is, as I've been alluding to in this show numerous times recently, America is not responding to the facts on the ground today related to the COVID-19 crisis. We're not responding to the reality of the facts on the ground today. We're responding with the same level of fear and paralysis that we responded back in March of this year. We're in July now, we're nearing the end of July, but back in March of this year, when most people became more and more familiar with the coronavirus. We realize now it came to America in 2019 sometime, and was being spread in China, but we didn't know about it very much. Got to March, America became aware, and we all went just all in with Dr. Fauci, the head of NIH, and saying, oh my gosh, this is, and we had horrific projections about death counts that were within a couple of weeks. Admittedly, the authors of those studies that were projecting, millions of deaths and horrible circumstances in America walked back their studies big time, basically said, you know what, we were off by orders of magnitude. There are not going to be that many deaths. So we were way off. We're not talking 3 million deaths. And so they pulled their numbers back. This happened both with the study from England, Dr. Neil Ferguson, as well as the study out of University of Washington. They said, the numbers are bad. But we haven't adjusted not just our spending reaction, but our whole policy reaction to COVID based on the facts on the ground today. As we've been talking about, the death rate is going down. The death rate is going down, and that should be a huge driver to helping people become more comfortable with the idea that, we haven't eviscerated the COVID virus. We can't make it go away, but we can treat it we can respond to it based on the facts that we know. So the death rate is going way down. We have all sorts of people in the American left, from the leaders, the governors and mayors. We have leftists in this country, and certainly the media, trying to perpetuate paralysis of fear. It's a pandemic of fear. Perpetuate the fear by blasting headlines out saying, oh my gosh, X number of new cases. This is terrible. New cases, new cases. And no one ever points out from Washington to say, actually, the new cases numbers don't matter. New cases are coming along because we're testing more, and the vast majority of people who even are going to test positive, because we're testing people who feel well, who are not ill, you're going to get positive tests, and it doesn't mean you're going to get sick at all. You're going to be asymptomatic, you're going to, or you're going to have very mild symptoms and go on about your life and move forward. So we have false fears put into the American psyche from undue, irrational emphasis on new cases, as though that is a measure of anything, instead of the death rate going down. The survival rate of coronavirus is 99%. We're not talking about the plague. We're not talking about bubonic plague. We're not talking about Armageddon. We're talking about COVID-19, which has a 99% survival rate. We also aren't talking enough in Washington. Is not coming out enough from the leaders in Washington, the reality that doctors in this country are finding effective treatments. We don't talk about that. All we do is sit and wait until Fauci or somebody else in Washington says, well, pretty soon we're going to have a vaccine. Yeah, we're working on that vaccine. We're throwing millions of dollars toward a vaccine. And not attention to the fact that doctors in this country have already said they have found first one that came to people's attention, hydroxychloroquine. We've had Dr. Robin Armstrong from Houston on this show because he happens to be a friend and I knew him, and he's a doctor who's been treating completely effectively, treating people who've actually contracted COVID-19, even senior citizens in a nursing home in Houston, completely effectively bringing about their, giving them treatment with hydroxychloroquine and other minor elements that are part of the protocol, and these patients are all getting better. So we're finding effective treatments, hydroxychloroquine. There was another big study. The Henry Ford Center came out with a study saying, yeah, actually this hydroxychloroquine is actually really working. Another big study came out saying the same thing, but somehow we don't transition our policy in Washington to deal with the facts on the ground. And then we had the other remedy. Hydroxychloroquine quickly became, the left tried to malign it because President Trump mentioned it once, and since he mentioned it, or more than once, but since he mentioned it, the left had to quickly just squelch that optimism and hope and say, oh, no, he's crazy, this is terrible. And Fauci, Dr. Fauci gave numerous conflicting statements about hydroxychloroquine, not listening to the doctors on the ground around the country who have been saying, hey, this is working. Hydroxychloroquine is a great solution. We have a great doctor here in Texas, Dr. Yvette Lozano, a friend of mine. She's been treating patients with COVID-19. She sent me a picture of her clinic where she gets there in the morning. The line starts at 6:30 in the morning out the front door and down the parking lot of her clinic because people here, she's a doctor treating COVID-19 with hydroxychloroquine, and people are getting better. In addition to that, we had on this show about 2 weeks ago, or July 2nd was the first time, we had Dr. Richard Bartlett out of Midland, Texas, and he's treating effectively, treating COVID-19 with a different treatment. He's using what is an asthma medication, budesonide, and he is administering that for his patients with COVID-19, the asthma medication budesonide, through an inhaler, a nebulizer. So he's getting at the point that there is that he is finding amazing and complete solutions. And I want to send you something because he just texted me today, Bartlett did. If you want to know more about his work, he has a new website, which is covidsilverbullet.com. covidsilverbullet.com. You can go to his website. You can get the paper he has written about this. He explains what his treatment is. He explains what he does. He's making it very public. So you have people pushing back on him saying, well, this hasn't been tested. We haven't had double-blind tests. We haven't had a major pharmaceutical company or somebody else do research, which he obviously freely admits. He's saying he discovered as an emergency room doctor, as he was trying to figure out, because there was no other treatment being offered to people who were very sick with COVID-19. They only were admitted to the hospital when they're very, very ill. If they came in with mild case of COVID-19, they were sent home with a basic take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning message. And only when they're severely ill, they were admitted. And then he discovered all that was happening when they're admitted is they are, monitored and cared for, but they eventually are put on a ventilator, intubated, put on a ventilator. And the ventilators, we've now discovered, are actually killing people. They weren't helping. Maybe they helped some people, but they were also killing people. The point is, Bartlett's brought this new treatment out. He's been on the show talking about it. He's been trying to spread the information around the country. And I'm getting at the point back to the Senate and the argument about this massive spending they're asked to make. We are treating COVID-19 as though we're still in the mental place when we learned about this crisis in March. We learned about this disease in March. And we're not acting like we have facts on the ground as we do now in July of the same year. Here in July, we have these treatments I just mentioned. We have declining death rates. We have the CDC acknowledging they have to stop calling it a pandemic because the death rates no longer justify their definition of pandemic. So CDC saying it's not a pandemic. You have treatments available. You have experts around the country. We talked about this a couple of days ago on the show. Experts around the country, in the thousands now of doctors who've signed on a statement to President Trump. We should not be shutting down this country. It is unhealthy to quarantine healthy people. It is unwise. It is bad policy. Don't quarantine healthy people. Let them get out in the world and function. Let businesses function. All of this is coming from the actual on-the-ground doctors and experts who are treating patients, and yet our policy in Washington seems to be still being driven by the people who responded to this crisis in March with an extreme overreaction, as it has turned out an extreme overreaction, and we can't pivot away from the facts we thought were true and we were wrong, the facts in March, to the facts on the ground we have today. And I say all this to say part of the pushback should be from the Republicans in the Senate, we have to talk up. We have to stop agreeing with the panic mode that is being pushed and pressed by the left, because we have to be talking about real doctors treating real patients, not someone like Dr. Fauci who hasn't treated a real patient in whatever it is, 25 years. He's an academic. He happens to hold a prominent position. I'm not saying he's a bad person. I'm saying he hasn't treated patients in 25 years. In America, we should be responding by listening to the people actually treating and finding effective treatments. And because we have those treatments, declining death rate, it's not a pandemic anymore. And we have experts saying kids should go back to school, businesses should open, we should not be in the shutdown mode, we should never be quarantining healthy people. You have all of that, and yet what the Senate is being asked to vote on is a bill that is premised on, rooted in the very frightening picture presented to America in March of this year. And the final point, as I wrap up the show today, the final point on that is this. Many people are recognizing, including we had on our show last week, or the days run together, last week anyway, I think it was, Congressman and Dr. Abraham from the 5th District of Louisiana flew in to come and be on the show to talk about the fact that he's a doctor and he's a congressman, and he said he's been treating COVID-19 patients also with an inhaled steroid like budesonide that is used for asthma, an inhaled steroid through a nebulizer, and he's saying they're all getting better. We don't have to have the panic. He is trying to press and have more people become aware. So part of the answer of the Senate Republicans should be that we're not going to go with this massive spending plan because we're not going to keep functioning as a country based on what we learned in March. We're going to base our decisions about spending and policies and schools and opening up America based on the facts we have today. We are not dealing with the bubonic plague. We are not in Armageddon. We have an ugly virus. We have sadly lost Americans. Sadly, people have died. More people have died of the flu this year than of COVID-19, but we still don't want any deaths. We don't want people to be sick. We want to try to help people. But when experts are telling us, open up America, open up the schools, let people out of their houses, don't quarantine them, the death rate's going down, We need to let people get healthy and out of their homes and back into life. When the experts are saying that, it's time for policy in Washington to adjust to the new and true reality on the ground. I'll tell you one very, very quick story, and then I got to wrap up the show. But I was making political phone calls, which I end up doing a lot of times, trying to help raise money for something. And I called a guy, and he said, and I called him basically to ask him to donate to this political cause. And he said, you know, I want to tell you, I saw your show with Dr. Bartlett. And he was telling me he saw my show, the interview with Dr. Bartlett, and on the show, the word Bartlett talked about his method of healing, of treating COVID-19. And he talked about how he went to church on Sunday, ran into a friend of his who's an American Airlines pilot. The American Airlines pilot said, yeah, my stepson's tested positive for COVID. Now I have to get tested, and I've been tested, and I have it too. And he was feeling okay that day, I guess. But a few days later, he became very, very ill with COVID-19. This is the American Airlines pilot telling my friend this, and he said, I remember what you said about this Dr. Bartlett and COVID-19 treatment, and he got that treatment, and within 2 days, when he was feeling terrible and really ill and struggling, 2 days later, he was up and about and over at his father's house, changing out the carburetor in his RV. And I'm telling you the story to say, these are real life stories happening. More people need to be hearing these stories than the fear mongering emanating from Washington. And if you're one of the people who has emailed me to ask for Dr. Bartlett's paper, I cannot urge you strongly enough to instead, I can't keep up. I'm in the tens of thousands of emails I have from listeners asking for Dr. Bartlett's research paper. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical person. I don't have any medical advice. I'm a lawyer by background, and I'm a political activist. But I will give you the link to Dr. Bartlett's paper. You can get it on my website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage, under the blog. You have to go back and find it, or go to Dr. Bartlett's own website, which he has recently put together, called covidsilverbullet.com. I can't even answer all the emails requesting for his paper, so I urge you to go to his website and get much more information than I can give you. And that, my friends, is my show for today. I'm going to turn and tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. So we started in the very start of our show today, Leftist Tolerance Update. I should have called it Intolerance Update, but in any case, Redwood City, California would rather order the removal of BLM from a city street than allow MAGA 2020 to be painted on a city street. Apolitical Michigan high school coach fired for tweeting, "Trump is our president." Michelle Malkin physically attacked as a speaker at a Back the Blue rally. Neither the methods nor the goals of BLM or Antifa are peaceful. There is no tolerance for disagreement, no allowance for any opposition. Democrats support BLM and Antifa, and we need to make them own that in this election cycle. I know that doesn't say that there, but I'm adding it for emphasis. The BLM Antifa must not be allowed to gain power in America. Those who deny or don't see or refuse to call out the evil cannot lead America. And on the Senate GOP funding over the next bailout, feuding over the next bailout, Senator Rand Paul seriously questioning the wisdom of the further stimulus, more money for schools that refuse to open. Senators McConnell and Cruz at odds over the objectives, unclear whether or what the new stimulus will be. But here's the reality. The pandemic shutdown was never a good idea. In hindsight, it was not necessary. Continued bowing to COVID-19 fear narrative, rather than accepting COVID-19 overreaction truth, is taking a major toll on President Trump and the GOP and the U.S. economy. It's time to recognize, if we knew then what we know now, there would not have been a shutdown. Therefore, there is no need for continued shutdowns. Trust the U.S. doctors and the U.S. healthcare system. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I do this show Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Central Time. I love talking with you every day about preserving America, this most extraordinary experiment in human liberty ever to bless this earth. I do America Can We Talk because America is worth fighting for and defending. I do it because America matters. And I will talk to you next time.
Can we talk? Truth about America.
Can you